Listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is April the 3rd, the 93rd day of the year. There's 272 days remain to the year's over with. It's National Burrito Day. Run out and buy a half a dozen or so. National Chocolate Mousse Day. Independent Artist Day. And Pharaoh's Golden Parade. That was a breathtaking event that captivated viewers around the world. On this particular date, 22 royal mummies were transported through the streets of Cairo in a grand ceremonial procession. Kind of highlighted Egypt's ancient history, showcasing the magnificence of the past kings and queens. In every detail, from the ornate golden carriages to the synchronized performances, was designed to honor these legendary rulers. And there's also National Tweed Day, World Aquatic Animal Day, World Party Day, World Cloud Security Day, National Film Score Day, National Find a Rainbow Day, Fish Fingers and Custard Day, Great British Spring Clean Day, Great Walking Wheel, National Protocol Officers Week, and I've covered these several times already, and it's only the 3rd day of April. Now, before we move on to our show, see if there's anything in the news you might be interested in. President Trump took questions on tariffs and Israel on Air Force One. A father speaks out after his teen son was killed at a track meet. He was stabbed by someone who was supposedly his friend. Democratic representative has, Democratic Rep. Jared Golden introduced a bill for a 10% universal tariff earlier this year. He vows to work with Trump on key parts of the tariff plan. Says he hopes he can help. Russia's not happy with Trump's line in the sand with Iran. He said it's illegal and unacceptable. He may get more than a line in the sand if he keeps screwing around. Democrats are blasted for a disappointing stunt over taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners. A ban on taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners sparked a Democratic walkout in Georgia House vote. Now, if you want to know about a state that's got peculiar laws, you need to read my book, which is on Amazon. It's called Why Would They Say It? And that's about when a senior judge told me that I needed to back away from a black client because that's how attorney fortunes were made, and a friend of his needed money. You'll be very surprised at what happened. Well, senators from both parties are trying to require Congress to approve tariffs. They want to reduce the powers of the presidency. Val Kilmer, of course, just recently died at 65. He was Tom Cruise's co-star on Top Gun. Trump has confirmed National Security Council firings as Walz's signal shot woes snowball. Now, Trump and his administration have repeatedly defended Walz. That's Mike Walz, National Security Advisor. His multiple employees within the National Security Council were fired today adding to Walz's recent political woes that have snowballed since the Democrats first slammed him over March's signal chat leak. There have been monster tornadoes several places in this country. Killed 8, injured dozens, and there's people bracing for a lot more storms. A news flash I just got: a Russian jet just blew up a Russian dam with a thermobaric bomb. According to the story, Ukrainian radio jamming had blunted Russia's advantage in precision glide bombs by blocking the signals between the bombs and their navigational satellites, often causing the bombs to veer off their targets. And Russia's advantage in precision glide bombs by blocking the signals between the bombs and their navigation satellites caused the bombs to veer off target and hit unexpected targets. Well, the VP has come down on what he calls weird Democratic outrage over the head of MS-13 being deported. They're going to the mat to protect gangbangers, which makes you kind of wonder what the hell's going on. The Senate makes its next move to pass Trump's what's called the Big Beautiful Bill. They're passing Trump's budget. Began unfolding this afternoon. It's going to come to pass over the next 48 hours. The CEO of a home furnishings company was in the middle of his firm's quarterly earnings call on Wednesday when President Trump's tariff plans were revealed. Caught him off guard as he reacted in real time to the company's stock taking a hit. It's company's called RH. CEO Gary Friedman was discussing how the luxury furnishings company, which was previously known as Restoration Hardware, reported earnings that fell below the expectations of analysts. He was alerted the company's stock just dropped 25%. That was not what he anticipated. And certainly he was definitely caught off guard. Stellantis has paused some Mexico and Canada production, temporarily laid off 900 U.S. workers due to the tariffs. These are workers at American factories. They'd rather support workers at other countries than support Americans. It sounds to me like that's a company that needs to be kicked to the curb. Illegal immigrants in Aurora, Colorado got arrested for targeting homeowners in sophisticated burglaries. They use Wi-Fi jamming technology to shut down such things as Ring doorbells and Ring alarms. Well, crocodile hunter son Robert Irwin stunned fans by doing stripped-down underwear ads. 21 years old, posed for the Australian underwear company Bonds. He's, shall we say, showing a different side of himself. Subway has launched a new Doritos-themed footlong for a limited time. And if you rush on down to Lowe's and Home Depot, on some home and garden items are offering up to 52% off. Dr. Oz has just become head of Medicare and Medicaid services. Senate approved him, amazingly enough. Tufts University has come out in support for a student detained by ICE. They're demanding his immediate release. Department of Homeland Security says the students have engaged in activities in support of Hamas. Personally, I'd pull up some buses, round them all up, put them on the buses, take them to the border and say, there you go. Federal court hearing in Boston today examined whether it had jurisdiction over the case of a Tufts University doctoral student from Turkey. He was detained by immigration authorities as the university voiced support for the pro-Palestinian advocate. The case came as the president of Tufts University filed a declaration in support of a motion filed in federal court by Ozturk, who is accused of supporting Hamas. His name is Remeza Ozturk. Taken into court by Immigration and Customs Enforcement March 26 in Somerville, Mass. after the Department of Homeland Security revoked her visa. The DSA spokesman previously told Fox News Digital Ozturk was granted the privilege to be in this country on a visa, and she abused it. Well, Jasmine Crockett has open-mouthed and inserted foot again. Set off social media after touting being black is her qualification for a public defender job. Said she had no experience. Her primary experience was black. GM is going to increase truck production in the U.S. after the Trump tariff announcement. You're going to boost production of light-duty trucks. And let me tell you, talking about light-duty trucks, I've never been overly impressed with Ford till I got the vehicle I'm driving now. It is phenomenal. Well, and that seems to pretty much wrap up our news stories. There have been, there's a lot of unrest. There's no question about that. And some of the most privileged people in this country, I'm talking about students at places like Columbia and Tufts, are doing everything they can to support this country's enemies. If you're not happy, there's the door. Well, we've been talking about unsolved mysteries, or mysteries in general. This one is one that's been bandied about in a number of writings over the centuries. It's called El Dorado. It's located someplace in South America. We're not really sure where. And it dates from about 1538. Now, El Dorado is South America's legendary lost city of gold. And it's a twisted and ultimately futile tale of greed and insanity and tragedy played out over centuries and across an entire continent. The Spanish conquistadors who ravaged the great Aztec and Inca civilizations became famously wealthy, but they always wanted more. South America, Francisco Pizarro and his men captured the Inca emperor, Atahualpa who boggled their minds by offering a ransom of enough gold and silver to fill a room. Well, after they betrayed and murdered him, his successor, Manco Inca, took up resistance to the Spaniards, retreating to the remaining Inca forces to wage a guerrilla war from secret locations and secret forts in the jungles and in the mountains. And the conquistadors long believed that Manco Inca had spirited away the true wealth of the Inca Empire. And these suspicions were, of course, inflamed by popular legends in which the defiant natives gathered together huge piles of corn before presenting the Spanish with a single kernel. That kernel, said the natives, represented the proportion of the Inca treasure the Spanish had managed to get their hands on. The rest will never be found. Well, the story of El Dorado actually began in 1538, when a native carrying messages for the deceased Inca emperor was captured by the Spanish at Cajamarca. He came from the interior and, when questioned, revealed a very intriguing story. He said to the east of his homeland was a tribe that practiced an annual ceremony to appease their gods. Their king would strip naked, be covered with balsam gum, and priest would blow gold dust at him until he was coated with a layer of the precious stuff. Then would embark on a great raft surrounded by priests and nobles, and he'd row out to the center of a sacred lake before he dove into the water to wash himself off. Then other offerings of gold and treasure was thrown into the lake. After hearing the story, and the conquistador captain, Sebastian de Benalcazar, dubbed this gold-coated monarch El Dorado, the Gilded One. Well, in all likelihood, this story was actually based on truth, an account of the practices of a neighboring tribe called the Muisca. They lived in the highlands of present-day Colombia, and their worship had been based around Lake Guadalquivir, the sacred lake up in the hills high above modern-day Bogota. The Muisca, long before been conquered by a neighboring tribe, so if the tale was actually true, the ritual was only being practiced. But the question became, who knew how many years of loot might be piled up at the bottom of the lake? Well, based on the story, Benalcazar launched the first of many expeditions seeking to find the golden king in his city. Brutally difficult exploration brought him in 1539 to the territories of the Muisca, owned and discovered another conquistador. Gonzalo Jimenez de Quesada had already got there in 1537, and he had established the colony of Bogota. Well, while the Muisca had enough gold to whet his appetite, de Quesada was disappointed to learn that they didn't have any gold mines. But he did learn, through bullying and torture, the location of the sacred lake Guatavita. 1562, the merchant and engineer Antonio de Sepulveda launched a determined effort to search the lake for gold. He cut a deep notch in the rim of the crater surrounding the lake and drained the water through a ditch. So the level was reduced by about 60 feet before a collapse of that ditch killed a lot of the workers. De Sepulveda recovered artifacts, including a staff covered in gold and emerald the size of an egg. But a muddy lake bottom was hardly the city of gold the conquistadors still believed to be somewhere in the jungle or the mountains. Well, in 1541, a German expedition explored new parts of the Andes and brought back legends of a city called Omagawa, said to be overflowing with gold and emeralds. That same year, also in 1541, Francisco Pizarro dispatched his brother Gonzalo on an entrada to cross the Andes and penetrate the rainforest on the other side. The younger Pizarro became separated from his partner, Francisco de Orellana, and endured a nightmare of disease and starvation and hostile natives and the implacable, never-ending jungle. De Orellana, meanwhile, built boats to travel down the Amazon River. That was named for de Orellana's account of a tribe of fierce women warriors. He was to become severely ill and dies in attempts to find Maguire and El Dorado. Even more brutal fate was to befall the young soldier Pedro de Ursua in 1560. The new viceroy of Peru had decided to launch an expedition to occupy restive conquistadors led by de Ursua, who had a beautiful female companion. And jealousy about the alluring woman and extreme hardships of the wilderness fomented discord. And on New Year's Day, 1561, mutineers stabbed de Ursua to death. Well, veteran soldier from Europe, Don Antonio de Berrio, arrived in Bogota in 1580 to take up an inheritance from his wife's uncle, Gonzalo Jimenez de Quesada himself. And in that inheritance, it was stipulated he had to pursue the search for El Dorado. Well, de Berrio was already 60 years old, but he'd spent many more years in fruitless pursuit of what became known as a mirage. With after decades of failed attempts, a new entrant joined the crowded field, Sir Walter Raleigh. He arrived in the New World in 1595 with a squadron of ships and captured Trinidad, an island off the mouth of the Orinoco River, where de Berrio was, by then, had established his base. And he also captured de Berrio himself. Exploring the Orinoco River, Raleigh found evidence of gold mines and heard stories already familiar to de Berrio of a rich Inca city called Manoa, built on a lake called Parima. Returning to England, Raleigh wrote a book about it called The Discovery, introduced the legend of El Dorado to the European mainstream, and with maps showing Parima and Manoa, which would become the standard guide for explorers for centuries to come. Well, in England, Raleigh fell afoul of the new monarch, James I, was locked in a tower. Back in Guiana, de Berrio was competing with Raleigh's lieutenant, Caylus, to find Manoa. The search, of course, was fruitless. Each tribe they encountered would direct them further on. In 1597, financially, physically, and spiritually exhausted, de Berrio passed away with the bitter epitaph, "If you try to do too much, you'll end up by doing nothing at all." You'd think he was a member of the American Congress with that attitude. 1616, Raleigh finally secured his release and returned to the New World. But unfortunately, only death and misery awaited him. His son was killed in a skirmish with the Spanish, leading to a falling out with Caylus, who committed suicide. His return to England, he was seized and convicted of fomenting war with the Spanish and executed in 1618. Raleigh's maps continued to inspire fruitless searching, and it wasn't until 1800 when the Guyanese uplands were properly charted by professional explorers like Alexander von Humboldt. The Lake Parima and Manoa were proven to be imaginary. Attention turned back to Lake Guadavita, fanned by speculation on the quantity of treasure might lurk at the bottom. It was estimated up to £1 billion in sterling. That's about $120 billion today. That's according to an 1825 travel guide. 1912, a mechanized attempt was made to drain the lake, but the muddy floor dried solid before it could be dredged, and the expedition ended in failure. In recent times, the lake has been a protected zone, and the treasure of El Dorado remains legendary and still lost. You know, the appetites of the treasure hunters were further whetted by the story of Juan Martinez, a Spaniard who emerged from the jungle in 1586, claiming to be the sole survivor in an expedition attacked by natives. He said he'd been led to a great city called Manoa, where he'd actually met El Dorado, the Gilded One, in person. Eventually, he was allowed to return to his people, laden with treasure, and although he had lost most of that on the way back, he apparently possessed enough to lend credibility to his story. Well, from the jungles of South America, let's look at Oak Island in Nova Scotia in Canada. The year is about 1795. For well over 100 years, treasure hunters have sought to gain entry to a Canadian island pit in pursuit of a hidden treasure variously linked to everybody from the Knights Templar to William Shakespeare. But each time they get close to success, a disaster occurs. The Oak Island story has become a well-worn folk tale. The oldest sources of the tale are newspaper accounts from the mid-19th century, which relate events that have begun much earlier. In 1795, young Daniel McGinnis was exploring the half-square-mile island, possibly drawn there by reports of strange lights. While roaming, he came upon a suspicious-looking shallow depression in the ground beneath an overhanging branch. And in some versions of this story, the telltale detail is an old pulley hanging directly above the hollow. Well, what he saw whetted his curiosity, and he recruited 2 friends to help him dig and found a pit filled with loose soil. A little below the surface, they found a layer of flagstones, and beyond that, a layer of beams or logs. And they were not convinced. This was a man-made pit. The coast abounded with rumors of hidden pirate gold, particularly in connection with the notorious Captain Kidd. So the question became, could McInnes have stumbled upon the long-dead brigand's main stash? Well, the 3 men returned with help. Encountered successive layers, more platforms of oak logs or beams, and layers of clay and charcoal and matting similar to coconut fiber. In some versions of the story, strange markings were said to be found in the shaft. When the dig reached a climax with the apparent discovery of a chest, the shaft suddenly flooded and couldn't be drained. Well, a series of increasingly involved excavations followed this initial failure, featuring heavy machinery and mining gear. And the legend of the money pit attracted investors and venturers, including such luminaries as Franklin D. Roosevelt. He actually spent some time on the island helping with the excavations. And even John Wayne. Exploratory drilling brought up a core material that supposedly included links from a gold chain. Some accounts speak of old tools and fragments of parchment, while the stone tablet inscribed with a coded message was allegedly found in the early 19th century. Unfortunately, it later vanished and then reappeared in 1919. The only evidence of the stone is a 1970 record of the markings, which were decoded and apparently spelled out the message 40 feet below, 2 million pounds are buried. Video camera lowered down a borehole in 1971 obtained indistinct footage, which said to show a wooden chest and even a severed hand. But every excavation ended similarly. Just as a promising level chamber was reached, the shaft would collapse, so the bottom would give way, and water would rush in and flood the pit. That even happened to the many parallel shafts that were bored. Work soon proved dangerous. In the 19th century, one man died when a boiler blew up, another when a hoist broke. In 1965, 4 miners were asphyxiated by gas. Well, the failure of even the most professional attempts has led to speculation about the seemingly impressive engineering skills of the pit's constructors. Somehow, using pre-19th century technology, they dug a shaft over 100 feet deep, rigged it to include a series of elaborate water traps where any unauthorized breach of the main treasure chamber would result in its collapse. Well, 2 centuries of excavations at Oak Island have certainly taken their toll. The island's riddled with so many parallel and subsidiary shafts and boreholes that frankly, the location of the original pits become lost. Any information that the serious archaeological survey might have gleaned has been hopelessly contaminated by the dozens of digs. Treasure hunters, however, are undaunted, and further explorations are planned for the future. So, the question becomes, what might they find, and is there really anything there to discover? Well, since the story of the money pit first surfaced, speculation has been rife. In addition to the legendary Luda Captain Kidd, a variety of other pirates were proposed as the pit's originators, included Blackbeard or Edward Teach, Henry Morgan. Other theories included Spanish survivors of a treasure galleon blown off course, or British sailors who had captured a galleon and didn't want to pay tax on their haul. And then credence to these suggestions was the fact that both pirates and the British Navy had been known to frequent Mahoney Bay, where Oak Island is located. So the apparent structure of the pit said to resemble British military engineering techniques used in the 1700s. Well, but really, nobody knows who's responsible for digging the money pit. A survey of Oak Island by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute in 1995 concluded the pit was most likely the result of natural processes. The geology of the island lends itself to the formation of underground caverns, and these sometimes collapse, causing a sinkhole or pit to open up. And these pits may then be filled in with soil or other debris over time, with layers of fallen logs and branches washing in during floods or storms. The result could appear to be an excavator like an artificially constructed and filled-in pit. And the constant flooding of the excavated shaft can be explained by the presence of fissures and cracks that allow seawater to penetrate deep into the island. Well, if the pit's just a natural feature, how did it acquire such a body of legend? There are accounts of the money pit contemporary with the date of its alleged discovery. Earliest come from newspaper accounts from the 1850s and 60s and appeared in papers well known for inventing stories and even running tall tale-telling competitions. Money pit yarns all the ingredients of such a tale, and it may not be a coincidence it resembles the popular Edgar Allan Poe short story The Gold Bug, which had come out just a few years earlier in 1843. Poe's tale concerns a buried treasure, allegedly belonging to Captain Kidd, discovered when a rope dangling from an overhanging branch reveals the location of a pit. Well, subsequent deaths or in details of the legends, such as the gold links and the old tools recovered by excavators or the cipher stone pulled from the pit, are equally suspect. The former may simply be inventions, or if real, they could have been salted by prospectors looking to drum up investors. As for the stone, there's no proof it was ever existed, and the transcription from 1970 is almost certainly an invention. So the money pit may be nothing more than an out-of-control newspaper prank, which accumulated spurious details as its legend grew, and cost money and lives that are all too real. Also, although originally associated with the legend of Pirate Gold, the pit's most commonly linked to the Knights Templar. It's seen as the final destination for riches smuggled out of France and taken to Scotland under the protection of the St. Clair family. Found these North heritage through the Normans, supposedly gave them access to the secrets of transatlantic travel before Columbus, allowing Henry St. Clair to navigate the Templar fleet to Nova Scotia, arriving on Oak Island where the Templars employed the secrets of monumental masonry handed down to them from dwellers in ancient Atlantis through the temple builders, and later passed on to the Freemasons in order to build the money pit. Upshot of this fantastic tales, the money pit might conceal everything from stacks of Templar bullion to the Holy Grail itself. But this theory should also be seen in the light of the racist agenda that attempts to prove pre-Columbian title to the Americas for whites. Other outlandish candidates for creators of the money pit include space aliens, Incas, or Aztecs hiding gold from the conquistadors, and, of course, the true author of Shakespeare's works. Dr. Orville Ward Owen claimed to have decoded ciphers that proved the leading Elizabethan philosopher and statesman Sir Francis Bacon was a true author of Shakespeare's plays, and he'd hidden documents proving this in the money pit. Whatever may be your theory or your school of thought, it's said that there's proof of it in the money pit if it can just be recovered. Well, from the money pit in Canada, let's go to San Jose, California, and talk about the Winchester Mystery House. Now, the Winchester Mystery House is now a major tourist attraction. But during its 38-year construction, this wealthy heiress's home was possibly something much stranger. A decades-long negotiation with spirits of the dead. Now, the story revolves around Sarah Winchester, originally Sarah Pardee, the wife of William Wirt Winchester, heir of the Winchester rifle fortune. When her father-in-law, Oliver Fisher Winchester, manufacturer of the Winchester repeating rifle, died in 1880, followed 4 months later by his son William, Sarah Winchester was left a very rich widow. By this time, though, she was also a tragic figure, plunged into depression by the death in 1866 of her infant daughter Annie. Seeking either answers or comfort, she did the same as many in this era. She turned to a medium, a person who claimed to be able to communicate with the spirits of the dead. Exactly what Ms. Winchester was told or came to believe is the subject of speculation, since she never gave an interview, left a diary, or in any other way recorded her thoughts and motivations. But according to legend, she was told her tragic ill luck was due to the unwholesome attentions of the vengeful spirits of those soldiers, cowboys, and Indians shot down by her father-in-law's rifles, which had first become popular with the Union Army in the Civil War. And then the subsequent Winchester 1873 had become known as the gun that won the West. Furthermore, the story goes, the medium told Ms. Winchester in order to either evade or appease the spirits, she should move out west and build a house. And not just any house, though. One that would either shelter or confuse the spirits, depending on which version of the tale you believe. In particular, she was supposedly told the house must never be finished. So long as it was under construction, Ms. Winchester would be spared the further depredations of the spirit world. Now, whether this injunction was ever uttered is unclear. Seems more likely this was a post hoc rationalization of what happened later. Whether or not dispatched by supernatural exhortations, Ms. Winchester did indeed move west. While visiting her niece in California, she found a suitable spot in Santa Clara Valley, just a few miles from San Jose. 1884, she bought a farm there and started building. She used an existing 8-room farmhouse as a starting point. And over the next 4 decades, she kept the house under continuous construction, hiring shifts of workmen to build around the clock. By 1900, this humble farmhouse had metastasized into a 7-story mansion, and by the time she died in 1922, the building sprawled across 6 acres and had 160 rooms, 6 kitchens, 13 bathrooms, 47 stairways and fireplaces, 2,000 doors, and 10,000 windows. But the house wasn't just simply large. Ms. Winchester was unconstrained by building controls or even budget. The death of her mother-in-law in 1897 meant that her share of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company brought her a staggering income of $1,000 a day. It's equivalent to about $30,000 in modern money. And every day she issued new instructions. Rooms are constantly remodeled or simply demolished and replaced, and this led to a lot of bizarre developments, staircases and doorways that led nowhere, windows overlooking other rooms, chimneys didn't reach the ceiling. An estimated 500 to 600 rooms are built in total, though only 160 remain. And even these proved hard to count because the layout of the house is so confusing. Seems Ms. Winchester had a fixation with the number 13. Among other instances, she had 13 panes in many windows and 13 steps on many of the staircases, 13 ceiling panels in some rooms, and 13 holes in the drain covers in the sinks. Well, no architect drew up a master plan for the convoluted, contorted monster that resulted. According to legend, the instructions for what was to be built and how were issued by spirits, or at least divined by Ms. Winchester during nightly briefings. In the center of the house was the Blue Room, where Ms. Winchester would hold a seance every night, wearing one of 13 special colored robes that hung from 13 hooks. Supposedly a bell would be heard ringing at midnight and 2 a.m. every night to mark the hours of arrival and departure of the spirits. But the question became, was she hiding or helping? with the spirits. Perrin and Miss Winchester step in a different bedroom each night to avoid the spirits and constantly change floor plans to devise methods of throwing them off her trail. But at the same time, she allowed only a couple of mirrors in the house because spirits must not see their own reflections. And she installed many brilliant lights because spirits were said to dislike shadows. Now, there was something to be said about the widow Winchester herself, since she availed herself of secret passages and hidden doors to spy and creep upon her servants. 1928, American Weekly magazine imagined her nightly progress. It said when Miss Winchester set out for her seance room, it might well have discouraged the ghost of the Indian or even of a bloodhound to follow her. After traversing an interminable labyrinth of rooms and hallways, suddenly she'd push a button, a panel would fly back, and she'd stick quickly from one apartment to another. And unless the pursuing ghost was watchful and quick, he'd lose her. This is supposed to be very discomforting to evil spirits who are said to be naturally suspicious of traps. Well, from the Winchester house, let's go to Languedoc in France. The year is 1896. The village of Rennes-Le-Chateau lies in the heartland of the Cathars, a heretical Christian sect suppressed long ago but linked to tales of treasure, both monetary and occult, as well as rumors of which bring thousands of tourists a year to explore the areas they used to call home. The reason for the extraordinary popularity of Rennes-Le-Chateau is the legend of Berenguer Saunier. Saunier was a lowly priest appointed to the poor backwater parish of Rennes, the foothills of the Pyrenees, in 1885. But in 1896, he began to spend lavishly and in very peculiar ways. He paid for expensive renovations and redecorations of the parish church, including the installation of stations of the cross featuring incongruous elements such as a boy wearing a kilt and an inscription above the entrance that read, "This is a terrible place," and a grotesque statue of a devil crouching in the porch. Saunier also bought up tracts of land around the village, building an imposing house, the Villa Bethania, and a library housed in a folly known as the Magdala Tower. He spent lavishly on hobbies such as stamp and book collecting, gathered a menagerie of exotic animals, and hosted decadent parties. He traveled to Paris and gained entree to the salons of the demi-monde, mingling with peoples of influence and figures from the occult world. Now, of course, the church was disapproved of his profligate spending, and Saunier was suspended from his duties. He refused to leave the village, though, and was actually still making grand plans when he died in 1917, somewhat unexpectedly. The mystery of Saunier's sudden wealth lingered unsolved till the 1950s when a story began to circulate. It said that the abbey had stumbled upon mysterious documents hidden within a Visigothic pillar in the church. Rennes had been an important site during the Visigoth era of the 6th and 7th century A.D., and tourists can actually see that pillar today in the village's Saunier Museum. The hidden parchments were said to be written in Latin and in code. In 1969, British writer Henry Lincoln investigated these mysterious parchments, presenting documentaries on the subject. Later co-wrote The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, the book that inspired the Da Vinci Code. The books claimed that parchments revealed Christ's descendants had come to France and ruled as a Merovingian dynasty, but it had later been suppressed by the Catholic Church. To protect the Holy Bloodline, a secretive but immensely influential society, the Priory of Sion, had been set up, counting luminaries from Da Vinci to Isaac Newton to Voltaire among its grandmasters. The Priory had also operated via the Cathars and the Templars, both in on the explosive secret, and later through Masonic groups to contend with the Church for hegemony of Europe. Lincoln claimed Saunier had stumbled upon this web of secrets and bartered them into power and popularity, and possibly he'd also recovered hidden Cathar Templar gold stashed under or near Rennes. The Da Vinci Code claims to be based on historical fact. The story of Saunier and his parchments is central to the mythos, but they make shaky foundations for a house of cards. Saunier was undoubtedly eccentric, made strange alterations to his adopted village, and kept eclectic company. However, there is no definitive evidence that he found any scrolls or dug up any treasure. The purported Visigoth pillar is said by many to be a fake, and there's no evidence it was ever in the church in Rennes. The inexplicable wealth has probably been wildly overstated, and toward the end of his life he was so poor he was reduced to asking for loans. The true source of his money is almost certainly the legal practice of selling masses, which is why it was suspended by the church. Strange decorations he added to the church at Rennes probably relate to his political views, which are radically pro-royalist and favor recombining church and state. Symbolism of the devil and the other changes reflect this. Even the popular inscription over the entrance to the church might have a innocuous explanation. Could be a reference to a mass said when dedicating the church, where terribleness leads in the sense of awesome rather than terrible. Despite the realms of text written on the matter, no treasure or relics have ever been found in or around Rennes. Saunier is simply a corrupt priest. Where do these extraordinary legends come from? Now, most of them can be traced back to hoaxes and fraudsters. The first of these was Noel Corbeau, the new owner of an eatery in Villa Bethania, Saunier's own old home, who hoped to drum up custom by peddling a juicy treasure mystery. 1956, French newspapers caught on to Corbeau's yarn, and the hoax began to snowball. Rennes became established as a focus for mystery seekers and treasure hunters. And from here, the hoax was taken on by the unsavory fraudster Pierre Plantard. And Plantard held reactionary pro-royalist and anti-Semitic views and developed an elaborate fantasy in which he became a key figure in French history. Plantard claimed to be the last scion of a royal house that traced its antecedents back to the Merovingian kings, which awaited its chance to regain the throne, institute a sort of neo-fascist utopia and restore France to greatness. Included in this fiction was the shadowy Priory de Sion, supposedly founded 1,000 years ago. Now, documents in the French National Archives at the Bibliothèque Nationale appear to support this tale, but in fact, there are those that say these are forgeries planted by Plantard's cronies. The Priory did exist, but only because it had been founded in 1956 by Plantard himself as a vehicle for his religious nationalist preoccupations. At least that is one view. Plantard co-produced The Gold of Rennes in 1967, later more dramatically retitled The Cursed Treasure of Rennes-Le-Chateau. A book placing Rennes at the center of the fantasy. Included were alleged copies of the actual documents Saunier had recovered from his hollow pillar, complete with coded references to the Priory. And that book, of course, became a bestseller, but Plantard's fiction really went global through the tremendous success of the 1982's Holy Blood, which expanded the story to connect Rennes and the Priory to the Holy Grail and the bloodline of Christ, including the startling revelation that Plantard was the descendant of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. Well, this house of cards couldn't really stand up to close scrutiny, and it was soon demolished by researchers and by confessions of many of those involved in the hoax. Plantard was exposed as a con man and charlatan, eventually banned from any activities relating to the Priory when he was caught up in a 1993 fraud trial. This thorough debunking has done little to dent fascination with the Rennes and its supposed secrets. The little village gets more tourists than ever thanks to its tangential association with the Dan Brown book and the movie. And today it plays host to an engaging cast of eccentrics and seekers known as Rennies, including a mole of Rennies who has dug a labyrinth of tunnels that threatens the village's foundations. Rennies' allure no longer relies on the Priory myth, but on its vibe as a sort of French Glastonbury. Well, since the publication of the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail and the Da Vinci Code, multiple books have claimed that Rennes and the surrounding area are home to everything from the tomb of Christ and Mary Magdalene to the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail. It's been suggested that the hills and valleys of the region have been chosen or even shaped using ancient lore dating back to the temple builders, the Egyptians, and even the Atlanteans, the ancient island empire of Atlantis. And it was made into a sacred landscape with meaning and symbolism carved into every encounter and every contour. Well, the Magdala Tower, built by Saunier to house his library, has become a key location in the mystery of Rennes. When you dig deeply into a lot of the myths and legends, it's absolutely mind-boggling what you can discover. And a lot of these strange discoveries are, in fact, backed up by records on file at the Bibliothèque Nationale. But such is the revelations that have taken place about phony documents filed by Plantard and his cronies that you really don't know what's true and what's false. Now, before we end today's show, I want to urge you to go to 404 Arizona in El Paso, which is the outlet for cheesecakes. And let me tell you, they are phenomenal. We just went and got our monthly fix. Now, when you're there, be sure to mention that you heard it on the show. I would also appreciate it if you might check out my books on Amazon. It's under Ken Hudnall. There's both ebooks, hardback books, or paperback. I write about unsolved mysteries, lost treasures, ghosts. You'd be amazed at the topics. And when everything is uploaded, which I would work diligently on every day, I should have almost 100. When I retired, or was forced to retire medically, I was playing video games and having a great time. And my wife said, look, I'm not retired. You're not retired. Go write another book. So I started writing. I'm still doing it. It's some of the topics surprise even me. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. I want you to enjoy and let me know what you think about it. Online, go to the Ken Hudnall Show. So until tomorrow at this time, Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show, saying have a truly great evening.